My name is Daniel Prinn, and I'm a staff writer here for The Movie Buff, and this is The Movie Buff Show. This is also my last interview out of the Tribeca Film Festival. For this conversation, I spoke with the team behind the documentary Girls Cant Surf, which had its premiere at the Tribeca Film Festival on June 17th. I spoke with director Christopher Nelius, as well as retired twin pro surfers Jolene Smith and Jorja Smith Harmon for Girls Cant Surf. The documentary tells the story of the women's pro surfing tour in the 1980s, as some women took the surfing world by storm in an attempt to achieve equality and change the sport forever, as they try to achieve their dreams and compete at the top of their game. Thank you for supporting TheMovieBuff.net and supporting us throughout this Tribeca coverage. So let's get right into this interview. Could I just have you guys introduce yourselves?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jolene Smith. Jorja Smith Harmon.
And I'm Christopher Nelius.
Okay, and we're talking about Girls Cant Surf. And Chris, you're the director and co-writer?
That's right, yes, and a producer as well. It was my initial idea way back. And then I was able to bring together a team to make the film.
Okay, well, let's start there, where you got the initial idea for Girls Cant Surf.
Yeah, so I live in Sydney, Australia. It's a big surfing country, and I'd worked previously on some documentaries with a couple of male pro surfers from the same generation, if you like, of the women that's in this film. And so I'm younger than them, and I've been sort of regaled with all of these amazing stories about pro surfing in the 1980s, and it always seemed to me like this really kind of fascinating mixture of ego and flashiness, and they were the hottest things on the planet there for a while, and as I said, like, I'd hear these amazing stories about the guys, and I also learned that it looked like there was lots of money, but there wasn't really that much money, and it was kind of trying to figure out what it was. The sport was trying to figure out what it was and what it wanted to be. And so I worked with these male surfers, and somewhere, about 5 years ago, I just thought about the women, and I just thought, if the men were scrapping around, how the hell did the women do it? Like what's their story? And I knew that from being exposed to surf culture, films and magazines and whatnot, that I'd never really seen the answer to that question in a film or in a book or anything like that. And I knew some of the names, particularly the Australian ones, and like Pam Burridge and Wendy Botha and stuff. And I started to reach out to them and try to hopefully get them to talk to me on the phone and stuff like that. And the more that I learned about them, the more I thought, wow, there's really a fantastic dramatic story here, and really wonderful characters that you'd want to meet. And I kind of took it from there.
Okay. Now twins, can I hear about how you guys got approached for the film and how you came on board?
Well, it was it was funny.
I think when they were interviewing some of the Australian girls,
Christopher was interviewing some of the Australian girls like Jody and Pauline Menser, Pam Burridge, and I think stories were being told about, you gotta, and the twins this and twins that, and oh, you gotta talk to the twins. And I don't think Chris was familiar with the twins, and so somehow out of the blue one night, sitting down for dinner, my phone rang, and it was from Australia, and my husband was like, "Oh, don't answer, it's a robocall," and I was like, "No, it's Australia, somebody's calling from Australia." So I answered it, and it actually was Michaela Persky from Persky Productions from the film, and she talked about wanting to interview us and flying us to Australia. And
we set up a Skype meeting.
We
actually did an interview with Chris on a Skype meeting, and kind of told him some of our stories, and that's before they decided about us coming to Australia and filming. the interview.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how long was that interview that is seen in the film?
That is a day's interviewing, I think. We spent a day in the studio, and that was kind of roughly what happened with each of the characters. In terms of the women, I think I interviewed Pauline and Pam twice, but it was roughly around, all up, probably about 5 hours of blabbing. 5 hours of talking in the chair and hearing all the stories and whatnot. And there's so much that's not in the film. So many stories from, there's a feature doc in every single one of the characters in this film. And I don't mean that flippantly, like there really is. And they all really have such powerful stories. That hardest part of this was the edit and writing it and just trying to like hone it into something that felt dramatic and felt like the essence of the story was correct, and balanced, and trying to give everyone their dues, so to speak. But we could never do that, like we could never, it's not the encyclopedia of the history of women's pro surfing or anything like that. It's still a film. So but that, my editor and co-writer Julianne and I, we labored heavily on trying to get that balance right and the voices right and the sense of history right as well.
Were there any stories from the interviews that like kind of physically hurt you to have to cut out of the film?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, in filmmaking, you call it drowning puppies, right? It's you have to drown some puppies in the edit suite. I remember, so the film is 108 minutes long, so that's a bit over an hour and a half, and I think we had an assembly version, rough version, that was 3.5 hours long, and I thought that was awesome. Like my editor and I were both like, this is fantastic. So just think about, we cut that in half, and that was full of drowned puppies.
The poor puppies.
Yeah.
Now,
and there's so many amazing stories. There's, Jodie Cooper was punched out by Johnny Boy Gomes at Pipeline once, and Frida has really amazing stories about her battles with Wendy in the 1980s. There's just so much kind of lore and lore, to be brought out from even just the women that are in this film, let alone, the ones that aren't. And I really hope this could like lead to more and more storytelling on the women's side of things, because the men's side of, if you look at surf culture, like the men's side of surf culture is really well told, like it's actually it's really good at building its own myths and mythology, and so and so from the late 1970s at Makaha or something like that, and I think it's going to be really great to do more of that on the women's side, because the stories are there. For
sure. Now, do you guys have any interesting stories from your time on the tour? I think it was 1984 to 1990.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, do you guys have any fun stories that you just kind of like chuckled out as soon as you think of them?
We have a lot.
Yeah.
Especially with Pauline. But when Christopher interviewed us initially, he kind of wanted to know what kind of injustices did we ever come across in our surfing. And one of the big things in the story was how OP tried to get rid of the women's event. And at the time, we were just upset that it was practically in our backyard, this contest, but it was one of the biggest contests on the tour. It was in Huntington Beach. It was the OP Pro. And one year after Jorja had won the OP Pro in 1988,
mm-hmm.
And the following year, they tried to tell us that, we're going to get rid of the women, but we're going to keep the bikini contest, and we're going to give the prize money to the men and bodyboarding. And that was one of the stories we told. Is initially we were just upset that we weren't going to have a contest in our hometown, but then we realized, wait a minute.
The bigger impact was that this was like the domino effect. Because once the OP cancels, then the rest is history. Like the rest of the contest sponsors will cancel the women behind.
Or they might have a decision of saying like, well, maybe we don't want to have the women either. So we started, before social media, we started a whole letter writing campaign and wrote to OP, wrote to the city of Huntington Beach, wrote to everybody that we knew. And
our local papers, everyone. Yeah. And we started this campaign and then literally, you know, maybe 6 weeks later, all of a sudden they changed their mind and they were going to put the OP back on, and because they had so much negative press. But we have a lot of stories. We have stories of us traveling, sleeping in our board bags, our luggage getting lost,
showing up with no surfboards, borrowing Pauline's
surfboards, just things like that. Yeah.
Or renting a really tiny rent-a-car with like 10 boards on top, you know, with 4 girls and 4 suitcases in the tiny little compact car, driving through France. Yeah, a lot of good stories.
Okay, well, going back to the letter writing, was it frustrating for you guys that like you even had to do something like that? Like the inequality had gotten to a point where you actually had to do that letter campaign?
Yeah, it was like the final straw. You know, it was just like we put up with a lot of stuff, and it was just like, really, what? You know, no, we have to.
Well, especially since they were keeping the bikini contest, we just felt like that was so wrong. That bikini contest was more important than the women's surfing.
Yeah, it was really degrading and like embarrassing, and we were just.
And sometimes they would even run the women's surfing heats during the bikini contest when everybody in the audience was watching the bikini contest.
Right.
And
yeah, that's what Frida says, right? Like in the film, like she was out surfing and then everyone would just turn around and watch the bikini contest.
Yeah, it was embarrassing. Like we just put up with a lot of stuff. But that was just it. Like we can't let this go on without saying something. We can't let this contest fold under our feet, you know, especially being in our backyard.
Yeah, pretty close to our home. Yeah, initially we didn't really think, we just thought, oh man, that's gonna be, you know, that's wrong that they're doing that. But then the more we thought about it, the more it progressed into, yeah, it's really wrong. We need to do something about this. We need to write letters, we need to tell everyone about it, and we need to let the media know. And yeah, not really realizing so much how all the other sponsors on the tour could have done the same thing really easily. And so by them reversing it, we had like a little victory. But at the time, I think later on we realized, oh, that could have been just devastating to the whole tour for women.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like you can't really predict the impact it would have had if you didn't do that, but like there might not be a women's tour today if you didn't kind of pave that way and write all those letters.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I think we were just upset that it wasn't happening close to home. And then it was like, wait a minute, no, wait. Like if OP does this, everyone's gonna cancel, and you know, we just can't have that. Like it was just we're not gonna stand for this. So yeah.
It'd be like Wimbledon saying they're not gonna have the women's side of the event.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I honestly, I don't even think that some of the Australian girls knew that was going on, because the OP Pro always took place in August, and then they decided in April, 4 months prior, that they were going to cancel it. And I think all of us California girls, we were like hey, wait, no. And I don't know even if the Australians even had time to react before we were like the closest to the front of the battle. So we wrote all our letters, and
we created the negative press against them, which caused them to change their mind. Yeah, thankfully.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
Now, staying kind of on that topic, like one thing I really liked about this documentary is that it does kind of get like an angry reaction, like especially just to reference that recession bit where the men's side had 1.7 million and the women's side's purse was 150,000, and I was like, okay, that's a giant difference. And then I got more mad when I was just mad that the guy, because I was like, okay, like maybe they'll change it, but I was more mad when the guy was like, the guys were mad about sharing 150,000. It's like, okay, like the audacity, right?
Yeah, crazy. Like less than 10%. It's just crazy.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys wanted to speak to that. There's a question in there somewhere.
I think at the time, I think we were just, we saw what the men were getting, and we thought just, they're getting this, like, why can't we eventually get this? And
Sure.
I think we were just striving to get as much as we could at the time, but there was nothing really, there was no platform, there was no structure, there was no culture. So I think we were thankful for what we could just get, like we could just scrape up.
I think we were thankful that we could even just barely be a part of it, at the time.
I think we just were optimistic that something, if we just keep going, we just keep trying, we just something will happen.
Although there was one contest in Australia that it was in Maroubra, and they had a women's only event, and it was put on by Head Start, which I don't really remember what kind of company
it was. I can tell you this because it was, I lived with it for so long. It was the Agree To Pro, and Agree To was a like 2-in-1 shampoo product.
Yeah, a shampoo.
And yeah, and this was one of the puppies we drowned. And it was a really interesting one because you guys got like a lot of mainstream media attention, and there was a guy, I don't know if you guys remember or knew about this, but there was a famous Australian sports journalist, TV journalist, who sort of turned it into a bit of a battle of the sexes thing with Pam Burridge. And he was like, oh, I could beat a girl and surfing, and then Pam said, all right, let's do it. And then she was, cast onto the front page of the, most popular newspaper in Australia, and kind of embarrassed and stuff like that. And so there was, even when it seemed as though the women were able to put their best foot forward and have this opportunity, it would still, because of the culture of the time, particularly in Australia, it would just still end up being about the fact that they're women, and becoming, instead of just looking at, from what I can tell, instead of just looking at you guys as athletes and wanting to celebrate it and isn't this great, it had to become some sort of controversy about the men. And it's a shame. It's a shame that you guys had to live through that. Did you, when you came, here's me just interviewing you more. Yeah, well, when you guys were coming onto the tour, did you expect that type of environment, and did you think that you'd have to sort of deal with all that stuff? Because it's, as you're saying, like, you didn't have a platform from which to kind of argue your case, so to speak.
Yeah, not really. I mean, actually, when we were amateurs, when we surfed on the high school surf team, our high school surf team coach, if the men were losing between another school, and we were like 16, 17 years old, our coach would be like, send in the Wonder Twins because we need to bring in our points. And he sort of held us up in high standards, and he was like, okay, bring in the girls. And it was Jorja and I and our good friend Phoebe Linebrook, who we would sweep all the women's 1, 2, 3. And we would always raise our score. So we never really, and we surfed the NSSA, which the amateur organization, which was kind of separate. It was based on, you know, you had to be a full-time student, you had to have good grades, and your goal was to make the national championships. And it never really felt like we were almost separate from the men. We had the women's division and we had the men's division, and it always felt kind of equal. And it wasn't until we turned pro that we really felt more of that division.
Yeah.
Like we were taking away from the men, or we weren't always super welcome at those events. But growing up, we never really felt that. We just, you know, we always felt really equal. In fact, we were co-captains of the surf team our senior year in high school, along with the guy. We were the first girls to ever be co-captains of the surf team. So yeah, we were fortunate that we always got a lot of support, and we always felt pretty equal. I mean, we never felt like, a lot of the guys really supported us when we grew up, and yeah, it wasn't until we were on tour where we really felt the difference, you know, in the prize money and the support and the conditions that we had to surf. Yeah, put the girls out when it was low tide and windy, or yeah, just, you know, wait for the best conditions for the men to serve, but put the women out, you know. Yeah, that's when we really felt it on the pro tour.
Now, what got you guys into surfing?
Our older brother surfed, and we really looked up to our older brother, and our dad surfed, and we grew up at a beach where they would separate the surfers from the swimmers, and they would say, you guys swimming, go down further down the beach. This is a surfing only beach. So at the time when we were young, the boogie boards had just been invented, and we were boogie boarding. And we'd always get kicked out of the water by the lifeguards because we were bodyboarding, and then the lifeguards, we started going, well, let's just pretend like we're on surfboards. So we would sit up on the boogie boards, and we started standing up on boogie boards because we were so little, you know, it wasn't a problem. But then our dad and our brother saw us standing up on the boogie boards, and they were like, here, let's start riding some surfboards. And we did whatever our older brother did. Yeah, we really looked up to our older brother, and when we were about 12, our dad bought us some boards and wetsuits, and we started surfing. Yeah, even our 2 older sisters would surf, but they were more like fair weather surfers. Yeah, so our brother's friends kind of took us under their wings, and we were at our local spot, and we would always surf together, and it was great. Like we had the best support from our brother and all his friends, and yeah, that's what started us surfing. And because we had each other, you know, we would push each other. We would, you know, I would see Jolene on a wave, and I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna go get this next wave because she just caught that wave. Hey, did you see my wave? Like, did you see my wave? So yeah, every day after school, we were always in the water, and we always had local friends that we surfed with, and yeah, kind of pushed each other. A big supportive local spot. And we were lucky we had surfing for PE in high school.
Okay. So
every morning our coach would meet us down at the pier in San Clemente, and we got to surf every morning in high school and get credit for it. So yeah.
Cool. Now,
not every kid can say that. You get credit for surfing for PE.
Yeah, definitely not in Canada for me. Now, being on the tour, like, and having, like, it seems like one big family, but like having you, like, you having each other, like, what was that support system like? What did that mean to you?
Oh, it was great. Yeah, it was great.
We were lucky.
We were really lucky.
I don't know if we realized it at the time. Well, maybe we did. I don't know, but we were fortunate to experience it together. And but you know what? When we would surf, if one of us would lose, you would have to deal with the double feeling of loss, or the double the feeling of excitement.
The excitement of victory, like, yeah, we were both like, yeah. And then, you know, it was always hard because one of us would lose, you know, early on, and then you know, we would always want to support each other. And we were lucky we had each other. We were lucky because a lot of the girls like traveled in groups, and we did that too. We traveled with other girls. Like, we traveled one year with Pauline. We traveled a year with Alyssa
and Kim Merrick.
And you know, just to pool our resources. Like, you kind of had to. We had such limited resources. We had to, like, always pool our rental cars and apartments and things. But we were really lucky that we had each other. I mean, it was an amazing experience for us. There was some really good times, really, really fun, good times. There was some bad times, but I think overall it was really, really great experience for us.
Mostly good times.
Mostly good times, yeah.
We have a lot of good memories.
We're lucky that we had each other. Yeah, for sure.
Were you guys ever...
It's hard for us because we wouldn't even know what it would be like by ourselves.
Fair. Were you guys ever on the podium together?
No, we were always like on the opposite ends of the bracket. It was so funny for so many years. Like, I was always seated in the top 8 because I kind of was around the top 5, and she was kind of like around like 8, 9, 10. So she had always had the surf the trials, and there was always like this bracket where we would always almost meet.
Well, and when we were surfing, the highest trialist always went against the lowest seed. And Jorja luckily was always.
I was kind of like in the middle, so somehow we avoided, you know, going 1-on-1.
There were times when we could have met up, like in the semifinals.
Yeah, there were times, but it just didn't happen. But yeah, it was just,
she was Jorja was more consistent than me on the pro tour. She would be like second, third, first, second, third. Me, I would be like second, third, ninth, 7th, 5th. You know, I don't know why, but
I think I was more motivated by money, I think.
Maybe because when we were amateur, I was way more consistent than her when we were amateur, and it just kind of flip-flop. Yeah, she caught up to me then when I went on the downhill. No. I don't know what it was.
Fair. One I wanted to ask was it always going to be called Girls Cant Surf?
No, it was that was a last minute thing. And for years it was called the Sideshow. And like basically the metaphor of, you know, the women always being the sideshow and the men being the main event. And then, you know, and I think like it's fair to say in the 40 years or 35 years in this story that really changes. And if you look at surfing today, you know, women really are the main event. Yeah, we threw around, you know, we threw around all these names, and it was very harrowing trying to decide on the right one. And but I really like Girls Cant Surf because I think it encapsulates the controversy, and also it's a bit brash, and I think that's what, you know, how I feel these women were, particularly in that 80s 90s era. Like, they needed to be brash, and they needed to be bold and fun as well. And I feel like it kind of sums that up in a nice way.
Yeah, I think it fits like a glove. When I was watching, like the only other thing I could have thought of, like maybe for a title, would have been "Pretty Good for a Girl," which seemed like a common.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, I think that's probably the euphemistic version of it. Like I'm sure there would have been people saying things way worse than "Girls Can't Surf" back in the day. Yeah.
Now, I'd love to ask about like just because there's so much information in this documentary, so I'd love to ask, what was it like structuring the film?
Yeah, it was, from a filmmaking point of view, that was easily the toughest part. I didn't really, coming into the project, I didn't quite realize how, I didn't realize it would be such a feminist film in that sense, like I didn't realize that this over the decades, this really is an example of why women should be taken seriously and why women should have equal pay and things like that. And it's not just about surfing, it's about how we should be treating each other and so on. And so once Julianne and I realized that that was kind of like the big takeaway, we knew that we had like these really incredible individual characters with their own personal stories that are really dramatic and inspiring. But then we also had this broader story about the surfing world and how much it's changed and how change actually happens, and just how hard it was and how long it took. And so juggling those two things and trying to get a balance right all the way through the film was our biggest challenge in terms of the information, as you say, and like what do you have to have in there that you can't not have in there, for it to still make sense. So there were lots and lots of long hours in the edit suite and months in the edit suite trying to get that right. The balance between the personal and the broader story, because one thing I'm confident in saying is like every single woman in this film is such a character, so unique. They have such great stories and they're so different, and yet they kind of had to band together to be taken seriously. It's not a soccer team, it's individual surfers who are competing against each other. So yeah, balancing all of that was really difficult. And I think we recut the beginning of the film 80 different times and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, I watch it sometimes and I go just like, whoa, there's so much in here. But that's what makes it great.
Now, was there any footage that was hard to get for the film, like maybe legally or just in general?
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's an archive film, so it was a huge challenge to source the material. I'm really happy with where we ended up. Like it feels really rich, and but that was a combination of kind of like your usual places, like you go to ESPN or you go to TV stations here in Australia or South Africa and all that kind of stuff, and look for things. We found great news interviews with the twins and all that kind of stuff, and in the end, some of it we couldn't afford, so we had to try and find other alternatives. But a big part of it as well was the very few surf photographers and videographers from the day who A, turned up to actually film the women, and then B, kept it. There was just a couple there, and then everyone's personal archives was really what makes this really powerful in terms of the imagery and the archive footage that we have, and the way that it's cut together is the twins took video and there's great video of them, like really hilarious stuff in France. And then there's and then, you know, Lisa Anderson was really generous with all of her. She carried a video camera when she was on tour. She was a big enthusiast of having video cameras and stuff, and all of her material was incredible. Pauline's like, you know, Pauline came to us with like a bag full of mini DV tapes, and she was like, I don't know what's on them, so you know, there might be some kind of lewd stuff you don't want to have a look at, but you know, sort of in return for everyone bringing their stuff in, we digitized it, and yeah, it's really brings a lot of the heart and soul of the stories, especially like those funny kind of travel things and craziness that all of them participated in.
Okay, that's brilliant. I'll start wrapping up here, but I just had the two more that I had. So I just wanted to ask if with what surfing it is today, like it's called the WSL, right? World Surfing League.
Yes.
So is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that the only sport with equal pay?
One of the few.
One of the few.
I mean, I don't really know.
Yeah.
But my understanding, and I could be wrong because things change quickly. My understanding is that the tennis Grand Slams have equal prize money.
Right.
So, you know, Wimbledon, French Open, that type of stuff. But not the entire tennis tour. But I do think that it's possible that the WSL is the only global sport that has equal prize money at that top tier level.
Okay. At least at the time of the documentary, it seemed like it, right? Okay. Now, are there still things in the world of surfing that could be done better today, just with the equality? Or just in general? I don't know.
I don't know. In our opinion, from where it was, it couldn't get much better. I don't think you know, back in our day, we didn't have jet skis to pull us out through the heavy, big surf. We definitely didn't have our own private locker rooms in the competitors area. We didn't have equal prize money.
We probably didn't have as much respect from the men surfers. I mean, there were guys that really supported us, but I mean, it seems like nowadays the men, well, at least from looking on the outside, it seems like the men are very supportive of the women surfing, and their level of surfing has definitely improved and increased. So it's great to see the women surfing really strong.
Yeah.
Again, you know, some of those women could beat the men.
For sure. Looking back, you know, 35 years ago, this is something like what we would have dreamed of. You know, our ideal picture of professional women surfing would be, you know, to have the prize money, the jet skis, the, you know, support of the men, support of the sponsors,
and be treated like a professional.
Yeah,
I don't know what your background.
I don't know how much better it could get.
Yeah.
Now, my last one was just, I wanted to ask one about the Tribeca premiere. So I'm going to look at my notes for the quote. There's a line here that Wendy says, like, you don't understand how important you are because nobody tells you, like, in this world of surfing. So after seeing the premiere, after seeing the documentary, like, I hope you guys know how important you are to, like, paving the way. So did you feel that way watching the film?
It's nice that the story's being told and looking back on it and go, yeah, we kind of did. It is important to us in the history that we participated in. I think back then we didn't really realize it, but now as we're older and looking back on it, yeah, it's nice. It's nice that our story's being told, and so
yeah, it's nice to get the recognition. It feels good, and I think Chris did a great job telling the story.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, it's
Thank you.
good.
Thanks for giving us the opportunity to be a part of this. We're so thrilled and so thankful. Yeah. It's too bad we couldn't all be here all together.
I know. I mean, like that's our, Daniel, you may not even know this, but we got into Tribeca last year, right? So for 2020. And I think we, we sent a cut, not a rough, something better than a rough cut. And we got in off the back of that in February. We got the news or something like that. And there was probably 20 of us that were going to fly over to New York, and Pam Burridge and Jody were like, yep, we're going. And a few of our team had already booked flights and were madly trying to finish the film.
We were online booking flights. Yeah.
And then it all just got completely extinguished. So it's, that was a real bummer. Everyone's got their COVID stories, but not being able to be there was a real shame, but for myself, but it was really fantastic to see, images of, New York and coming into summer and people starting to get a bit of hope and coming out of it.
Yeah.
And to see the film. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know it won't be Tribeca, but hopefully you will be able to attend some premieres in person, Christopher.
Yes, well, I mean, the film's already done its run here in Australia, so
okay.
So it's done a cinema run, and we had fantastic response here, and like 50,000 people went to cinemas to see the film, and it had a really good response here, and really looking forward to it coming out in North America.
Maybe we can all meet up in Europe.
I mean, why not? Why can't that happen? It can happen.
Let's have our premiere in Paris.
Absolutely. I will snap my fingers and make that happen. There'll be a moment where we get to high five, I'm sure.
Awesome. Well, so Jolene Smith and Jorja Smith Harmon and Christopher Nelius. That's how you say your last name?
Nelius. Yeah, like Cornelius, but.
Okay, Christopher Nelius. Thank you for chatting with me about Girls Don't Wait. Girls Can't Surf?
They can't surf.
Okay. See, like it's such a lie.
We can't surf at all.
It's such a lie. It couldn't even come off the tongue properly. So for Girls Can't Surf, thank you for chatting with me on the Movie Buff for your film at Tribeca.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us, Daniel.